when I was in Edinburgh doing my second Edinburgh show, and I was like optioned for $5,000. I had an agent. I was doing support on tours, and those years were great years, and I was making very good money travelling around doing theatre performances, hundreds of pounds a week, making thousands of pounds at the end of the month, and those were good times.
Hello, it's me again, Stephen Englander, with my chat show Between the Spreadsheets, and today I've got a very unusual guest. Can I call you unusual?
You can call me unusual if you want. I don't mind.
John Cooper. He's got another name, Danny Pensive, and he does all sorts of things. He's going to tell us about them and how to double your income all through COVID and make a fortune.
Hashtag allegedly.
Well, you're a comedian, an artist.
I'm a comedian, an illustrator, graphic designer, like improv tutor.
Yeah.
I've got a few plates that I spin because I'm self-employed, and I'm very much a believer that you just don't put your eggs in one basket.
No, well, it's lucky when you've got talents to do more than one thing.
I've got time on my hands.
Yeah. Well, but you were saying, you've drawn a comic now, haven't you?
I have. I think the biggest story I've got of the last year is when everything went into lockdown.
Yeah.
And all the comedy clubs closed, and all that income just disappeared off the table. I sat down and started drawing, and I've always drawn. I've always done bits of illustration, but I've never really leaned into it. And it's like, right, I did one comic strip, which is one page of A4, as just kind of like a comedian's life during lockdown, and then that turned into 100 strips. Yeah. And after I'd done the first 50, I put it on Kickstarter. A friend had said, crowdfund it, print it, get it done.
Oh, right.
So, and I didn't really know anything about Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And I did, and it funded itself. And then I did.
So stop you delivering parcels?
I totally did. Well, the fascinating thing that happened was, having been in stand-up for 20 years, and I still do stand-up, I'm very active as a stand-up, I managed to double my income in lockdown through not doing stand-up comedy, which is a horrible thing to discover. But that's the reality of it.
Because you are quite funny. I mean, I've got a video of you singing.
He's quite funny. Surprisingly, he's not a chancer.
Do you want to sing live, or should I just play the video?
Just play the video for the purposes of this.
I love goldfish, as pets they're overlooked. They're simple and they're beautiful and too small to be cooked. They're easy to look after and they're very easily fed. If you're allergic to fur or feathers, try a fish instead. I'll concede it's not a pet that you can take for a walk. And some say that their memories are very, very short. But they're beautiful to look at. If you're stressed, they keep you calm. It's just one of the many gifts that give goldfish their charm. Hello.
I know you because before I decided to become this famous, suave and sophisticated broadcaster that I am now, I came to some of your classes at the comedy Sportz.
At the comedy Sportz, that's the improv group, because that's where I met you.
Yeah.
And I thought you were quite funny. And it's kind of, and then someone, this is Stephen.
A lot of people sound very funny, and then they say, "Don't let him near your kids." But that's not the same thing, is it?
That's not the same thing at all.
So you so how are you monetizing now? Because I think that's what a lot of our viewers want to hear.
Yeah. Well, in basically the comic strip that I did, the printing just paid for itself through the crowdfunding. But what I'd unwittingly done is created a ninja marketing plan just through talking about COVID as it happened, one page at a time, and just putting it on all my social media and getting it out there. And that built up a following. And then I was getting people through the various... I'm part of a networking group as well to generate income through...
What networking groups are?
The most infamous one there is.
The breakfast one?
Not the breakfast one. The other one.
The porn one?
No, not the porn one.
The... I don't know.
But so anyway,
so it went out on that.
So it went out, and unwittingly, it's kind of like people are starting to follow this, and people are saying, "Oh, can you do some artwork for me? Can you do some drawing stuff for me?" And my commissions for illustration kind of doubled. So obviously my income increased, and this was just through. I couldn't go out. So I just drew and just sat and drew and realised, like, at the end of the year when it's kind of, you look back at what I've made, it's like, where's this extra time come from that it's allowed to? It's all been lockdown, hasn't it? I've not gone out anywhere. It's kind of, actually not necessarily. If I think about pre-COVID times and the amount of time I spent driving in a car around the country, this is time that has now been made productive.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a bit of an eye-opener where you go, okay, my hourly rate, if I now drive from here to Coventry, and like my hourly illustration rate is X, there's 3 hours that...
No, it's true. It's true. All online. I mean, I've been talking to people for ages now and saying that if you can digitise. I mean, even here, we're dealing with clients all over the country simply because we've got things like Skype. We've got our own systems. We've got Skype. We've got the telephone. We've got computer systems where we can log on to other people's computers just sat there. You know, so we don't need to leave the office, and we have clients all over.
It's amazing. I have totally embraced the digital transformation of last year. It's helped me. So it's been a combination of things. There's that, and the fact that all these networking meetings, different networks, I'm a member of one, but I go and visit others. I must have met twice or 3 times the amount of people through going to Zoom-based
it's good.
networking.
It's good. Networking's everything, especially if you're dealing with other businesses.
You know, and if you, I think advantageously, because with some groups, it's kind of like people overlap in a lot of spaces, like the trade spaces overlap a lot, some of the digital overlaps a lot, and it's like, I was like, I'm an illustrator. Why? I don't need to network. You look at the artwork. There's my website. Go and have a look.
So what do you do? Do you have pre-drawn scripts and pictures that people can download for a price, or do you do bespoke work for people?
Everything's pretty much bespoke. The client will come to me. They'll have an idea, and then it's the communication skills. It's the skills that I've built up in performance, not necessarily the introvert that sits at the drawing board. It's the extrovert that goes, hey, how you doing? How can I help you? What kind of thing do you want? Should we throw some ideas around? Should I have a look at this, that, and the other? So you begin that conversation in a way
so
that...
how can your art help small businesses?
How can my art help small businesses? I think a lot of people go to the... If you think in high terms of an illustration that you'd see in a print production magazine that raises the quality of the branding and the visual oomph that it gives, whereas some people tend to do things like go to Unsplash and get a piece of photography that's like free, and obviously one is paid for, the other is kind of free, so there's a monetary thing involved, but it does give you some welly. I'll give the last client that I've just had is a guy who's just starting up a charity called Nature Guardians in Salford. He's got the website. He was serious about getting it to raising its profile, so he got in touch with us and he said, what I want is an illustration of flats and houses and people using recycle bins and nesting boxes and rewilding and people doing gardening and putting green into their spaces no matter how big they're... So he had this great big glorious idea, and it's kind of like, okay, I'll tell you, here's some ideas. He said he wanted pictures of people, but I said the people are going to be really tiny because he want flats. So it's kind of, he needed visuals because I think that's the first thing that people need.
Original thought.
Yeah.
Where will people see your artwork?
People will see my artwork at johncooperdesign.co.uk,
which is coming up on the screen as we speak.
Good. Because the comedy has taught me about performance and show.
To contact you?
You can.
Is there an email?
There's John at johncooperdesign.co.uk. I've got 2 websites. One is johncooper.org.uk, and the other one is the design. And one covers the performance areas of me, and the other one is the visual stuff. And it's like I say, it's all kind of... I am very focused about using performance in the business space to get attention. To sell.
It's like
myself.
My kids that perform like crazy if they don't get their way.
Well, it's like Dan Pink, To Sell As Human. Have you read that?
No.
Fascinating book, brilliant book. Have you heard of Dan Pink? No. Dan Pink's a really good author. He's an American guy, and he wrote this book called To Sell As Human. And it's all about the old school sales process of the man who goes and sells the broom and knocks on doors and doesn't mind being knocked back and being rejected, and you build a thick skin.
Because that's what it is, isn't it?
Because that's what salesmen... But he then talks about modern social selling, which is where someone takes a photo of their dinner and sticks it on Facebook. Yeah. And it's kind of like, we are selling our lifestyle. We are all in sales because we are all selling ourselves on social media.
The other way, but it's hard to get your head around this new way, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's like, that's his argument, that like social selling is how you sell, because I was really anti-selling and I had to learn how to do it. And his book really helped me. Okay, if I picture myself in my performance space as on-stage John, on-stage John has got far better banter and patter than technical design John, who's kind of, what do you want? How do you want it? Do you want A4? Do you want a piece of A4 and A3 in colour? Okay, thanks, bye, and I'll come back later. And it's kind of like, because my head's in that game at that point. I'm in work mode as opposed to sales chat mode, if you know what I mean.
No, I know exactly what you mean. But this social media thing, it's really the way we should all be going.
Definitely.
It really is. But, you know, I mean, I speak to different guests and I always ask them, tell me a funny story. But you're in that world, aren't you?
So
tell me a miserable story then.
Oh, God, a miserable story.
Now you're a comedian, so you'll have them as well.
Oh, God, I've got too many miserable stories. Tell us
a happy one.
A happy one.
So it won't involve women.
Well, the happiest one is the most relevant one is the comic one, because like I say, I drew pictures, made money out of drawing pictures, which I didn't think I'd do. So I've done the 2 comics, and let's say doubled my income in the last year at a time when I know lots of.
Just tell me about the comics again. How are you making money out of the comics? Is it just like to get people to come and see you? It's the work that was generated off the back of just putting it out on social media. So it does bring us back to the social media conversation of you put stuff out regularly and consistently. So it draws people in.
Yeah. It's like your podcast. You have to be regular and consistent, and you'll build the audience over time.
This is what I'm trying to do.
You know,
not offend too many people.
So
you know, in fact, upstairs, it's one of my colleagues upstairs. They were talking about offending people. And I said, I've never offended anyone. And he looked at me like I was mad, and I just said, sorry, I've never offended anyone accidentally.
Do you enjoy offending people? Do you do it a lot or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know what it is? It's when you get idiots.
Yeah.
And it's like this guy phoned me up a few years ago. He's not, for some reason, I've not heard from him since. But he just said to me, I've been not being able to get hold of you, and I feel you don't want to speak to me. And I just said, I'll speak to you all day. It's listening. I have a problem. I don't know. But we were talking a little while ago about non-fungible items, weren't we?
Yeah, that's why I originally got in touch with you, because it's kind of like I'd started doing art, and then I read up about NFTs, which is how artists are now making cash off digital
Just let me explain. A fungible item is something that's interchangeable. So if I borrowed £100 from you, you wouldn't need to have the same notes back. So one thing exchanges for another. So it's got no personal identity. But a non-fungible token, non-fungible item, is something that each one is different from the next one.
Yeah, it's like a unique item.
Yeah. So if you drew me a picture of my face, I wouldn't want a picture of my foot, as I might do, but I wouldn't in exchange if I lent it you. So I hope that explains for you. So a lot of artists now are securing their artwork, and they've got the ability to sell each, like, especially if you're doing something moving, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can take one little piece of it, and that becomes a non-fungible token that in turn has value.
Well, there was an artist called Beeple, who suddenly became the richest artist, or one of the top 6 richest artists in the world, because he was on Instagram, and he would do a thing called a piece of artwork every day, and he had like 5,000 of them. And when NFTs came along, he put NFT. It must have been expensive to put the NFTs on them, because they're not cheap. And Sotheby's auctioned all his digital artwork off. And there was like $600 million or something like that.
I heard something like that. But they're also trying to use NFTs to back like cryptocurrency and as another form of monetization, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, it's not as. I mean, my knowledge isn't finite. I'm coming at it from the art angle of I can potentially monetize. Yeah. It's. I've been on the fence about it because it seems too good to be true, and you've got to have the money up front to buy the NFT, which is quite dear, and that's the price of that just goes up and down.
There's some software being developed because I'm always reading these sciencey magazines. I don't know why I don't understand them, but they were talking about this. There is some software coming or is already there.
Okay.
That you basically upload your artwork into it and it creates the NFT for you.
Oh, okay, that would be good.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. But if it's not here now, it will be.
Yeah. Because that's the thing because I've looked into which platforms, which wallet do I get, because you're gonna have the digital wallet to get the funds, and where do I put the funds into, and where does it sit, and then I need to have a unit of Ethereum, which is like $2,000 or something like that.
Is that how much it is?
I think at the minute it's like when I first looked, it was like 800, and then it went down, and then it went up, and then it went down. It's kind of floating around the 2K mark at the minute.
But you just to go back to another thing we were talking about before about the way stand-up comedy's gone, because that's been a bit of an upset for you, hasn't it?
Well, it's not so much an upset as we were saying earlier. In this last year that we've had, which is obviously there hasn't been any comedy clubs, that forced reflection of actually sitting down with a spreadsheet and going, okay, how is my career going? Yeah. It's like, you've and I think every comedian has had to do that, because there was a big conversation online about how many comedians will go back to it. Yeah. Some comedians have taken up delivery driving. There's a guy I know who did like the variety performance, and he set up himself as an electrician. Comedians who now do other things, and proper jobs, and it's like I've always done that, and I used to think to myself that it's kind of like how can I call myself a comedian if I've always got to have these other, but I call them foundations, other foundations and other spaces.
So when you've reached a point when all your ambitions and life goals and everything's been shattered, you've got to get a proper job.
Well, and I was doing comedy as
an accountant. I realised that there was no hope in life, and I became an accountant.
I have to go back to maybe 2012 or 2013 when I was in Edinburgh doing my second Edinburgh show, and I was like optioned for $5,000. I had an agent. I was doing support on tours, and those years were great years, and I was making very good money travelling around doing theatre performances, hundreds of pounds a week, making thousands of pounds at the end of the month, and those were good times. But like, if I literally sit and have this forced reflection, all I see is a gradual eating away of that as more comedians. I think what it is when Live at the Apollo came along, and when McIntyre's Roadshow came along, because prior to that, and I know I'm going back like more than 10 years now, comedy was just something that people fell into. Like I fell into it doing stuff on stage at a workshop, and there were like 20 comedians in the entire country. That's an exaggeration in the year 2000, but there weren't that many comics, and the status, it's kind of, what do you do? Comedy, really? Okay. And these days, it's back then when I started, do you do comedy? Yes. And people were like, that's a unique thing. Wow, okay. And do you do it professionally? Well, I've got an agent, so I travel to the clubs, and I get paid for it. So it's kind of like, yes, I guess I am a professional comic. Thank you very much. Whereas now I think attitudes have shifted slightly. There was a fantastic thing that was on Wimbledon this year where one of the presenters said, oh, look, we've got a couple of comedians there in the audience, and the camera goes over to them. It's yes, those guys, I'm not sure what they're called, but I've seen them somewhere. And it's like, that tells you exactly where this industry is at, because there's so many people doing it, and even the ones who are on telly who are incredibly skilled and capable, unless you are uber defined in terms of who you are and you are gettable in a certain space, even the top tier of TV people are just becoming homogenized into and that's just my opinion.
Well, you've got to be careful what you say these days as well.
I think that is just my opinion of, and I think anyone coming into the industry now has got a fight on their hands, because like there was a point where people were saying London just has this big sustained open mic circuit that's incredibly hard to penetrate, to get in and get out and move up. Whereas when I was in Manchester 15 years ago, 5 or 6 of us rocked up from the northeast. We'd already had this little northeast circuit go on. We were ready. We'd already carved out, and we all arrived in Manchester, and we all just got agents like that. And it's like there's a new agency had set up. I actually branded the agency. I came up with the name of the agency, and it's called Gag Reflex. A guy called Lee, a very good agent, very savvy guy. I think he's in it. I think he might be in Edinburgh this year. But yeah, I was with Lee for many years and had a really good, successful relationship with him. And then it's kind of like we just parted ways amicably. But those years were good years.
Yeah.
And since then, it's kind of all I'm seeing is an erosion based on promoters taking the pace a bit.
Yeah.
Not even that. Naive new promoters coming along, promising the world based on their own enthusiasm as opposed to their experience.
True. So many small businesses, but you've proven an example because you've come out of one industry, which you were very passionate about, and you've taken some of those skills, and it's been a progression. You've said to yourself, look, I need to do something now. I need to do something. That worked. It's not working anymore. So now I'm doing this. And you've looked on your own sort of set of skills. And you've made another business out of that, which is doing better than any others.
And it's just it's adapting. It's all it is. It's like yes, I've got the skills. You know, I accept that I have the skills to do it, and I've got the time to do it. But I think you've got to be like that. I think anyone who's got a business has to think like that.
This is what I tell clients all the time. A business, if it fails, you've not failed. That business is no longer working. When I started life in the fancy goods business, I was a wholesaler in Sportz.
Wow, okay.
I went bankrupt.
Right.
I thought, what am I going to do now? Certainly didn't want to work anymore. So I went back to study for accountancy. So it continues. You just do different things, and this is what I try and tell people all the time. But in the meantime, you're offering services as a graphic designer.
I prefer Illustrator over graphic
Illustrator,
designer because I like to niche right down into that space.
Because you mentioned websites.
I do websites which are mainly WordPress.
Just do the
I like to niche right down because
illustrations, so you can tell me what you can do for us. So illustrations, guest appearances if you want.
I can do.
What else do you want to sell?
What else do I want to sell? Just have people go and look at my work, you can go and see my.
To go. You've got no excuse not to go. You know you want it.
you know you want it.
And if you can, do contact John direct if you feel he can help you. And I mean, John will give you some advice about some design work and about where he thinks he can fit within your organisation.
All about communication.
It's all about all about talking to people. Getting the ideas across, so it's more than just talking to people, isn't it? And so do contact John direct, and if you're a bit shy and you want to speak to me, do speak to me, and I'll put you on to John. So have you got any last words?
No, I've enjoyed this. I could talk more. I could bang on for another half hour.
We'll have you on again.
Cool.
But thank you very much for coming in, John. I do appreciate
Cheers. Thank you.
It's been murder getting you here, but we got there in the end. And thank you for joining me. Please do join me on my my live show on a Thursday, and look out for future podcasts coming. We've got all sorts. Thank you for joining me.
Cheers, Stephen.
Bye-bye.